On the very day Hitler married, he ordered his brother-in-law's execution. That is no exaggeration. It happened on April 28, 1945, inside a bunker beneath Berlin, while the city burned above. Hermann Fegelein, a decorated general and a member of the family, was executed by firing squad. Today, we investigate his story and try to understand what led to his trial and execution on his own brother-in-law's orders. It is a pleasure to have you here. Now, let us begin. Who was this man? But in the end, who was Hermann Fegelein really? And how did he end up in that bunker beneath Berlin? Hermann Fegelein was born on the 30th of October 1906 in Ansbach, Bavaria, Germany. The son of a retired army officer, he was raised from an early age in a strict military culture. But before becoming one of Hitler's closest associates, Hermann Fegelein followed a path that very few people know about today. He was a horseman, not in the medieval sense, of course. Fegelein was an exceptional rider, a top-level equestrian competitor. He was charming and outgoing, and he knew how to win over the right people. He was the kind of man who knew exactly where he stood. But his talent with horses became a passport to something far darker. In the 1930s, Hermann Fegelein joined the SS, the Schutzstaffel, Hitler's elite paramilitary organization. Within its ranks, he found the perfect environment in which to advance. He was ambitious, ruthless when necessary, and naturally adept at internal politics, the kind of skill that was invaluable in an organization like the SS. In 1936, Fegelein was put in charge of organizing and preparing the equestrian events for the Berlin Olympic Games. He even tried to earn a place on the German Olympic team, but was eliminated in the qualifying rounds. It sounds harmless enough. Yet this position began to establish his reputation within the regime. The following year, in 1937, Himmler officially founded the SS main riding school in Munich, the Hauptreitschule München. Hermann Fegelein became a central figure in its organization. And then came the war, the ascent, the bloodshed, and the promotions. When the Second World War began in September 1939, Hermann Fegelein did not remain on the sidelines. He was sent to the front, and it was there that he showed what he was made of. In 1941, when Operation Barbarossa invaded the Soviet Union, Hermann Fegelein commanded SS cavalry units and became directly involved in some of the best documented atrocities of the war in Eastern Europe. Historical records showed that the units under his command were responsible for the deaths of more than 17,000 civilians during the so-called punitive operation in the Pripyat marshes in Belarus. Hermann Fegelein was not distant from those orders. He was at the center of them, and the more he took part, the higher he rose. On the 2nd of March, 1942, he received the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, one of the highest military decorations of the Third Reich. Later, in November 1943, he would also receive the German Cross in Gold, along with other decorations that turned his chest into a mosaic of medals. In September 1943, Hermann Fegelein was seriously wounded at the front, and it was precisely because of that injury that his career took an unexpected turn. Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, assigned him to Hitler's headquarters as his personal liaison officer. In practice, Hermann Fegelein became Himmler's eyes and ears inside the Führer's inner circle. Then, in 1944, Fegelein made the smartest move of his life. He married Margareta Gretel Braun, the sister of Eva Braun, Hitler's partner. Officially, Eva was not yet Adolf Hitler's wife. That would happen only in the final hours of the dictator's life. But everyone in the inner circle knew the nature of their relationship, and marrying Eva's sister placed Hermann Fegelein in an almost untouchable position. Almost. The bunker. To understand what happened in April of 1945, you have to picture the scene. We are in Berlin. The city is being bombarded from every direction. The Soviet Red Army is advancing through the streets like a tide that cannot be stopped. The Western Allies are coming from the other side. The Third Reich, which Hitler said would last 1,000 years, was clearly drawing its last breath. And Hitler was inside a bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery. The Führerbunker was a complex underground structure with rooms, corridors, and meeting chambers, all designed to withstand bombing. Inside, Hitler was still commanding what remained of his armies, even though many of those orders were no longer getting anywhere. It was April 20th, 1945, Hitler's 56th birthday. Those still expected to attend the celebration arrived. Among them was Hermann Fegelein. But the atmosphere was far from festive. All the news coming from the front was bad. The city was under siege. There was no real way out anymore. And many of the men still inside the bunker knew it. The question was, what to do with that knowledge? Each of them dealt with it differently. Hermann Fegelein chose the course that many historians consider the greatest mistake of his life. He decided to disappear. On April 27, 1945, when someone in the bunker went to summon Fegelein to yet another crisis meeting, he simply was not there. At first, his absence may have gone unnoticed. So much was happening. Generals were constantly coming and going. Orders were being issued to armies that no longer existed. But Fegelein was the SS representative to Hitler. He could not simply fail to appear. Once the search began in earnest, the SS did not have to look far. The deputy commander of Reich Security, SS Lieutenant Colonel Peter Hogel, was sent personally to find him, and he did. Hermann Fegelein was at his apartment in Berlin's Charlottenburg district. This is where the story takes a disturbing turn. He was not alone. He was with an unidentified lover. His wife, Margareta Gretel Braun, Eva Braun's sister, was pregnant with their first child at the time. Fegelein was drunk. Packed suitcases stood in the apartment, along with documents that should not have been in the possession of an SS general at that point, including passports and foreign currency. Some of the jewelry found there belonged to Eva Braun herself. The scene suggested that Fegelein was preparing to flee to Sweden or Switzerland. Then Peter Hogel opened a briefcase that changed everything. Inside were documents containing evidence of Himmler's secret negotiations with the Western Allies. SS soldiers took Hermann Fegelein back to the bunker. Before we continue, we want to make sure you are following the story and enjoying it so far. Leave the comment, "I want more stories." It only takes a moment, helps this video reach more people, and your comment may even be pinned, showing that you were here. The trial. When Hermann Fegelein returned to the bunker on the night of April 27th to 28th, it was already clear that he would not be leaving under his own power. A summary court-martial was convened. General Wilhelm Mohnke presided, joined by Generals Johann Rottenhuber, Hans Krebs, and Wilhelm Burgdorf. Then came a detail that almost no video on the subject mentions. Mohnke later described what happened just as the judges were about to take their seats. Fegelein became so uncontrollable, so furious and incoherent, that the trial simply could not proceed. According to officers who were present, he was still visibly drunk and in no condition to mount a coherent defense. But what happened in that room went beyond intoxication. Witnesses described a man in total collapse, unable to control his actions and screaming wildly. The court was adjourned without a formal verdict. Mohnke handed Fegelein over to General Rottenhuber and his security detail. This is where some of the most fiercely disputed versions of the story emerge. Did Eva Braun try to save her brother-in-law? It remains one of the episode's most controversial questions. Traudl Junge, a bunker secretary and eyewitness to the events there, said that Eva begged Hitler to spare her sister's husband. She reportedly tried to justify Hermann Fegelein's behavior, using the only leverage she had left, her closeness to the Führer, to save a member of her family. Hitler refused. But another account contradicts this version entirely. In a 2007 interview with Der Spiegel, Rokas Misch, the last surviving witness of the Führerbunker, claimed that Hitler had not directly ordered Hermann Fegelein's execution, but only his demotion. Misch knew who had fired the shot, but refused to reveal the name for the rest of his life. Which version is true? To this day, no one knows for certain. What is known is that Hermann Fegelein was stripped of his rank, reduced to the lowest grade, and taken out of the bunker. All this happened on the same day Adolf Hitler married Eva Braun in a brief, somber ceremony held amid the bombardment. A macabre irony, to say the least. On the night of April 28, 1945, Hermann Fegelein was executed. The exact location remains one of the few details historians still debate. The most widely accepted account places his execution in the garden of the Reich Chancellery. Other sources suggest that he may have been shot in the cell where he was being held. In his classic work, The Last Days of Hitler, historian Hugh Trevor Roper wrote that this was one of the rare questions about the period on which absolute certainty simply could not be reached. All sources agree on one point. Hermann Fegelein was shot by members of the SS, the organization he had served for more than a decade. These were men he had commanded and trained, and the organization under which he had been decorated. They were the ones who pulled the trigger. He was 38 years old. 2 days later, on April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler would take his own life in the bunker. Eva Braun, his new wife, would take poison at the same time. The Third Reich would collapse within days. Germany would formally capitulate on May 8, 1945. Hermann Fegelein's widow, Gretel Braun, survived the war, still pregnant. On May 5, 1945, 1 week after her husband's execution, she gave birth to a daughter, Eva Barbara Fegelein. The girl grew up, but met a tragic end. She took her own life in April 1971 after her boyfriend was killed in a car accident. Gretel remarried in 1954 and died in 1987 at the age of 72. That entire story, that whole ascent, ultimately turned to dust. What was he really trying to do? That brings us to a question historians still debate today. What was Hermann Fegelein trying to accomplish when he disappeared? Theory number one is the simplest. He was trying to escape. With Berlin encircled and the regime's collapse plain to see, many high-ranking officers tried to flee during the final days. Some succeeded. Hermann Fegelein, it seems, tried and failed. According to this theory, he had no sophisticated political plan. He simply panicked. And panic was almost palpable in the bunker's final days. Several accounts describe an atmosphere of collective madness, with people crying, drinking, and making irrational decisions. Hermann Fegelein may simply have given in to his survival instinct in the most chaotic way possible. Theory number two. He was trying to act as Himmler's intermediary with the Allies. The documents relating to Himmler's secret negotiations, the packed suitcases, and the foreign currency led many to believe that Hermann Fegelein knew about his superior's dealings and was trying to use the situation as a way out. There is another detail that few people know. On April 28th, the very day Fegelein was arrested, the BBC reported that Himmler had contacted the Swedish Count Folke Bernadotte in an attempt to negotiate a separate surrender with the Allies. The news reached the bunker and sent Hitler into an absolute rage. And who was Himmler's personal representative in the bunker? Hermann Fegelein. In that context, the theory that he was acting as an agent in those clandestine negotiations makes a great deal of sense. Theory number three. He was a scapegoat. When news of Himmler's betrayal reached the bunker, Hitler was beside himself, and someone had to pay. Himmler was far away. Hermann Fegelein was right there. He had made the mistake of disappearing at the worst possible moment. According to this theory, whatever Fegelein's true intentions may have been, his execution was driven more by Hitler's fury at Himmler than by anything Fegelein himself had done, or failed to do. He was simply the available target. Which theory makes the most sense? It is impossible to say for certain, but most historians today tend to believe it was a combination of all three. Fegelein knew about Himmler's negotiations, tried to use that knowledge as a way out, and was ultimately destroyed by it. What do the records say? Documents found and analyzed after the war help piece the puzzle together, but they do not resolve everything. The testimony of Hitler's secretaries, particularly that of Traudl Junge, who was present during the bunker's final days and wrote detailed memoirs about the period, is among the most frequently cited sources. Junge described the atmosphere in the bunker as surreal as though the real world had ceased to exist for the people inside. The British historian Ian Kershaw, who wrote one of the most comprehensive biographies of Hitler, examined the Hermann Fegelein episode in detail. Kershaw, like journalist William Shirer, portrays Hermann Fegelein as a cynical and dishonorable man, driven solely by opportunism. The connection to Himmler's attempts to negotiate is cited as the most plausible explanation for the violence of Hitler's reaction. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister and one of the few members of the inner circle to survive and write his memoirs, called Hermann Fegelein one of the most repulsive people in Hitler's circle. Above all, these accounts reveal the total collapse of any rational structure within the regime during its final weeks. Contradictory orders, arbitrary executions, loyalties that vanished overnight. Hermann Fegelein was a victim of that collapse, but he was also a product of it. The disturbing legacy. One fact cannot be ignored when discussing Hermann Fegelein. He was not an innocent man unjustly executed by a deranged system. He was an active part of that system. The operations his units carried out in Eastern Europe, the murder of more than 17,000 civilians in the Pripyat marshes, and his role in the SS extermination apparatus place Hermann Fegelein in a very different category from that of a mere victim of Nazism. For years, he was a loyal agent of the regime. When that regime began to collapse, he tried to save his own skin. In a sense, there is a grim irony to this. The system he had helped build and sustain turned on him at the moment when he most needed compassion. But the system had no compassion. It never had. That is perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire story. It is not the mystery of what Hermann Fegelein was trying to do. It is the realization that the machine that destroyed him was the same machine he had fed for all those years. To complete the picture, Hermann Fegelein's execution must be seen in the context of everything unfolding around it. By April 27th, when Fegelein disappeared, the Red Army had already reached central Berlin. Above the bunker, the streets had become a battlefield, with fighting from house to house. On April 28th, as Fegelein was tried and executed, Hitler married Eva Braun in a bunker lit by incandescent bulbs, with bombs exploding in the background. On April 29th, Hitler dictated his political testament, blaming the Jews for the war and expelling Himmler and Hermann Göring from the Nazi Party. On April 30th came the suicide. It all happened within 72 hours. Fegelein's execution was just one of the surreal events of those 3 days that sealed the fate of the Third Reich. But it may have been the clearest sign of how thoroughly paranoia, violence, and arbitrary power had taken over in the end. A regime that had murdered millions through cold, calculated bureaucracy spent its final days in a state of pure irrationality. So what do you think? Was Hermann Fegelein a traitor, a coward, or simply the inevitable product of a system that was always devouring itself from within? Share your thoughts in the comments. We would be very interested to hear your perspective on this episode. What is certain is that Hermann Fegelein's story is a microcosm of the Third Reich itself. A rise built on violence, inevitable destruction, and a dark end that no one within that system could entirely escape. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. As always, thank you so much for joining us. See you in the next video. Until then.